Right, so a few factors we want to kind of consider when we're thinking about groups. Groups are typically people that we know, right? And depending on the size of the groups, the environment in which the groups are in, the identities of the groups, the role that we sort of take on within those groups that ultimately shape our behavior. Right, we can look at maybe two kind of social experiments, Stanley Milgram experiment on like obedience, and we can maybe look at the Philip Zimbardo experiment on the Stanford Prison experiment, kind of see how groups define us, groups shapes us, positive ways and negative ways, right? So groups influence us either to do things that could be altruistic, really great, good things, or in some ways, a lot of proof out there that we can all be Nazis if we were in Nazi Germany, right? Because the group would be so influential upon us that it'll shape our behavior and we won't have the ability to say no, for the most part, right? So we'll look at stuff like that. Okay, so we'll look at the role of reference groups and social norms, right? What do we consider norm within our groups, and who do we reference within the groups? We'll look at some social influences flow through word of mouth communication and how they're especially powerful when they come from opinion leaders, people that we consider to have great sort of insight. We'll explain how whether in a family or a corporation, members of a group unit play different roles and have different amount of influence when making a collective decision. And then we'll explain how consumers are social beings that form groups, tribes, and communities around consumption practices and brands. Hey, quick thing, who has a blurb too to discuss? Okay, maybe Thursday? Everyone else? Okay. All right, describe the role of reference groups and social norms in influencing behavior. We have things like bikers. Right? Anyone here owns a motorcycle? Or ride motorcycles at all? No bikers? Right? Yeah, I got it.
You know what I said, I have a bicycle.
Okay. Oh, that can count, right? Cyclists. They always say, hey, motorcyclists, right? Bikers, as we could describe them, have particular sort of influences. Many of them tend to act the same. Like, well, is it an archetype or a stereotype? Do you have to have the aviator sunglasses? Do you have to have the leather jacket? Like, no, hey, groups of what we reference as bikers, we like they dress a certain way, they look a certain way. And that might influence us to also say, hey, if you go buy a bike, you gotta buy the leather jacket, you gotta buy the shades, right? You may need to buy some certain type of boots, and maybe some jeans, right? So we can say, where's that reference come from? Maybe movies, right? Maybe people that we know who were bikers or are bikers to some degree, right? But it has a reference. We have a frame of reference about a particular group of people, right? Sources of group influence, right? We've got things like social identity theory, meaning that we identify more socially than we do personally, which means that your personality is not unique. Your personality is influenced by groups, and multiple groups that you've been around, learned from, identify with, and you've taken on what you would describe as a personality. But really, you may think it's unique, it's so different than each person, but really it's just a multitude of different reference groups, right? So with social identity theory, say it always goes back to groups and our memberships within those groups, and we can kind of figure out why we are the way that we are. Right? Minimal group paradigm. We say, hey, what's the minimum sort of behavior before we become biased towards others? Right? So minimum threshold before we say, hey, there's another group and they're different than us because of X, Y, Z. What's that minimum threshold? Funny enough, we always kind of attribute people's behavior to like a personal thing. So if we're driving down the road, somebody cuts us off, the first thing we wanna do is catch up to the car and look in the car and go, look how stupid that person was. I knew it, right? I knew it had to look, like this person. But we're like, hey, we don't take it into the context of situations, right? Most things of our behavior is situational. Hey, are you hungry? Are you in poverty? Is something happening? Are you stressed out? All these different things. But we tend to have a bias, right? So with social identity theory, basically says we all have a bias. We have a preference for people within our groups, and we do not have a preference usually with people from other groups, right? Keeps it simple because say the human mind has a preference for comfort, and the unknown is not comforting. Right? So there's people that we think we don't know, we gotta figure out. We feel uncomfortable, too much work, right? We go back to our groups. And then we say, hey, that could be called situational, or people involved could cause incidental food consumption. You're not hungry at all, you go to a party, you start munching on the nachos. Like, why? You're not even hungry, you're full, you just ate. You're like, well, it's the thing to do here, right? There's some stuff out here, I wanna feel included within this group of people, so I'll just start munching, I'll eat. I think food is a shared experience within this group, so I'm sharing in the experience, even though I'm not hungry at all. Right? So we say, hey, that causes, we can see clearly that that's a great deal of influence even on our eating habits as well too. Reference groups, where we say, hey, this is all perception. All perception. Even maybe your own identity is just a perception. Maybe there's no true identity to be known. Maybe it's just feedback from different people that you take or don't take. Maybe you don't even accept people's feedback. Maybe you just make it all up yourself. Right? You're like, oh, I'm not like that. And everybody's like, yeah, you are like that. No, I'm not. You guys are all crazy. Right? Okay, right? So it could be actual or imaginary. Group that signifies influence, your evaluation, aspirations, or behavior, right? So we look at individuals out there in the world and we evaluate them to say, hey, who aspires us to be great? Who do I want to be like in this particular category? Right? And what do they do or how do they behave in order to get those aspirations, right? Or get those dreams met? Who can name someone that they that inspires them? Someone that you say inspired in any way, leading up to this point. Someone that you think like kind of like-mindedness, or is a great representation of something?
I can go for the generic cop-out and say my parents. My dad, I've seen the way that he handles difficult situations, and I aspire to be able to do the same thing in my own life. And my mom has gone through a lot of medical struggles and still has a successful business, and that has inspired me.
Yeah, absolutely. You say a common denominator, and that you like, hey, the power of connection I have with that person. I could be inspired by Michael Jordan, even though I've never met him, don't know him. I could be inspired by whomever. But your connection with these people probably is a big factor in that inspirational level. The influence that it has on your thoughts and feelings in your head. Yes?
I would say my aunt, and it's because like as a kid, like she's not my real aunt. Like my mom used to nanny her son, and like that family is like now our family. And I just recently started getting closer to her when whenever I've had issues and stuff, she gives me really great advice, and I feel like she sees me as like me and not just a child as I was to her before. So like she's the one that told me about stoicism, and I just feel like the way that her mind works and the way that she perceives things, I want to be the same way. Obviously not exactly the same,
Yeah.
but that I feel like she found a lot of peace within herself, and she hasn't let people like well, maybe now, but like before she would tell me how certain things would get to her, cause I love, like, people get the reactions out of me, you'll see it in my face. I do care, but I try not to show it.
Yeah.
So I wanna become like that, you know?
Which is great. You're like, hey, usually someone influencers means someone who overrides our normal thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to think differently. That's what an influencer is. You're like, hey, left on my own, I might come up with different problem-solving things, but my dad and mom are opinion leaders. I value them, so they override that, and they probably will override anybody else that I know, which means I probably accept their advice than I would somebody else, right? And same goes with your type of reference groups, all right? Associate, aspirational, disassociative, right? When we think of like associate, like, hey, we actually know these people, like we know. Disassociative would mean like, hey, I daydream about, being like Michael Jordan, right? Michael Jackson or something, right? Like that could be disassociative, something that you don't even need to know them, but they have a mental concept in your mind to some degree, right? Normal guides of behavior, right? We got descriptive norms, right? So think about, we think about in the setting of, hey, we all have belief systems, right? I'll talk to you, you may tell me your ethics and your morals and beliefs, but then at the same time, you may not do half of that stuff in your actual physical behavior, right? So then I would say, well, what's the norm of your behavior that we physically can measure? We've got to get descriptive norms. What do people actually do? How do they celebrate? What do they participate in? Right? We could all say we're kind, if we are religious, we could say, hey, I'm this and that, but I don't really do the tradition. Right? But then we can have prescriptive. Prescriptives would be like, hey, what's kind of insinuated by the group, right? It's not really explicit, but like it could be non-descriptive, it could be subliminals, right? Abstract things, but we understand it, we know it. Norms depend on comparison groups. Remember we said when we're measuring groups, how many people in the group? Depending on how many people, only a certain amount of leaders will pop up in a group, right? Out of those leaders, how strong of a leader are they? Do we take their opinion? Will we commit atrocities? Will we do good things because of it? What's the bond of the strength? Think about it, we go to a concert, we become ambiguous. So we go to a concert, we're like, oh, nobody can identify me out of 1 million people, so I might behave in a way that I wouldn't traditionally behave if I was by myself. Right? I might cause a riot, I might fight, I might set a fire, right? If I see everybody else doing something crazy, I might do it too. Everybody jumps up, I think I gotta jump up now too, right? Do as the Romans did. So, like, it all really depends on these sorts of settings and reference points. So norms depends on associative norms, right? Those who are close that we can associate with, and disassociative. Things that we just observe out there that kind of mental concepts. When creating associations with a reference group, we say perceived typicality. Right? We never get it right. Most of it is perception. We perceive what's the typical sort of behavior. A good example for that is St. Patrick's Day, right? I went and participated in Shamrock Shuffle, the running thing.
Shamrock Shuffle?
Yeah, the running. It's like a marathon.
Oh, I'm
Down.
thinking like every day on shuffle.
No.
Like a shuffle.
Yeah, and then you think of like St. Patrick's Day when we lit up the River Green and all that, you're like, hey, this is a big group setting where people are gonna wear green, everybody's Irish, right? It doesn't matter, right? The ethnic part of that holiday doesn't matter, right? You get all sorts of people, all different ethnic groups, everybody wears green, representing St. Patrick's Day. Typically everybody drinks if you're of age and you're a drinker. If you're a drinker and of age, typically gonna drink, you might drink a little too much. Might be a day when you feel that you can drink too much, right? That's a celebratory thing, right? We find that to be a norm, which means we wouldn't even bat an eye at somebody drunk on St. Patrick's Day because that's a normal, typical perception that we have of St. Patrick's Day. Conformity, change of beliefs or actions as a reaction to real or imagined group pressure. Here they're saying red sneaker effects, right? It's just kind of giving the thing that, hey, if, since the color red is so strong and identifiable, if people start to wear them quite a bit, we might be very pressured to wear them, right? Because red is such a strong color. Can you think of an example of a time where you felt that you had some sort of group pressure, right, to act or believe in a different way, whether it was real or whether it was your imagination? Yeah.
Well, last semester, I was in a class, and like, I kind of wasn't in my confidence the way I am now, so I wanted to like sit back and like not be a leader, but they all were like, well, like you're a senior, she was in my group, so like you should just be the leader of the group, and I was like, okay, like I guess, but I didn't, I actually didn't, like genuinely, cause I was just like not in a place where I felt comfortable like leading a group, like being in the front of the class, like I would have to, feel like more comfortable than them all. That's what I see a leader as, lead the group. Even though I could lead in the background, like, tell them, make sure everyone does their homework and stuff with the group and stuff. Going up to the front of the class, I was like, so who wants to present this part? Cause I didn't,
Yeah.
Whenever she would call on our group, and they'd be like, who wants to go up? And they're like, you're the leader. And I'm like,
But think about it, like all it took was the group to give you information, whether perceived or real, it didn't matter, right? It changed the way you felt about yourself. It gave you confidence, and now you've taken on the role of a leader, even though you didn't think you should have or wanted to, or whatever the case may be, right? It's that power of that. Like if you all walked in the room and, or in this classroom, and we all looked at each individual and just talked about how awesome, and we all agreed, like, man, you're awesome. It changed everything about your day, maybe even about your week. You're like, wow, there's people out there that really thinks I'm great, I'm
Tim is the
awesome.
best.
Yeah, Tim is.
He is.
So yeah, we have conformity. We have a tendency, right? We have a tendency to want to act according to the group. Conformity operates on unconscious level, right? Kind of a social default. When we say unconscious, is automatic response. If we put in a situation where we stand out, we're gonna feel anxiety or stress. Like we're put in a situation where everybody stares at us in the classroom, it's gonna make us feel weird automatically, right? And we may adjust our behavior because of that to some degree. So it's a social default. Immediately we default to it, and we may try to conform even though we don't want to. Why? We say we always want to ease discomfort. Even if it goes against what we believe, we always want to ease the comfort, right? And if that's true, then that means we could be convinced of doing anything just to ease our comfort, right? Anything, really, in a group setting. There's some differences in susceptibility to interpersonal influences, right? So there's to be a degree of maybe say resilience that some people have, right? We do say we do have personalities, right? We do have distinct things about us that can override group influence. We can be very stubborn and like, I don't care about what the group said, right? We can be very resilient, like, well, I thought about that, I disagree with the group, right? But some people don't have all those traits to be able to override the influence. Some people will. Here's a question. For each type of social power, force, influence, share an example of the time you experienced that form of influence. Alright, so share an example of a time you experienced a form of influence based on conformity, norms, whatever the case may be, right? Talk about that when you were, tell me about a time that you had some sort of influence because either it was people that are very personal to you in a group setting that kind of persuaded or influenced you. Some people that weren't very personal to you, were in a setting, but you don't really know them like that, right? But maybe the setting or environment influenced you. It could be a university setting. Right? We all don't know each other like that, but we could still be in the same room and be influenced to a degree, right? So I'll give you a few minutes to talk about that within your group, where you can think of some examples of that. Remember, the other part is conforming. We're just trying, where you're just trying to conform to everybody.
And then we finished class, but then MJ was like, oh, I'm just gonna get up. And then once MJ got up, everybody else left. But it wasn't, it hadn't had their disciplines yet. Like I wasn't gonna leave, but since everybody else got up. Digital marketing.
I don't want to be the one person to miss out on that. I often given the say, kind of like bring peace to the situation, not necessarily.
Like that. It's like,
If you went out and you do that, oh, where do we want to go? And it's like, oh, you're the deciding vote. And I'm like, oh, well.
you know, that's the thing, like, there's a girl on TikTok that like, every time, I bet you guys have seen this, every time she sees people use too much, like, and they waste it, she cooks for the homeless, and she feeds the homeless. She makes millions of dollars, but like, I feel like it really doesn't matter, because she's gaining the money from like how she's selling it, even though she's not doing
This week we get a lunch. But I don't want to get into this. It was I'm like, I don't know if I should put it out again. They voted because Wade wouldn't be paid on. Why didn't you need?
she was
Yeah.
Like, I was over there, and then my cousin and my sister, like, they're getting ready for all of this, right? And then I was gonna go get ready. So it's like, we're just gonna be short.
Who here would describe themselves as a non-conformist? Like a person you have a tendency to usually go against large group thinking.
It depends on the circumstances and the situation.
Yeah, but, okay, but you think generally speaking, you think you're more,
I don't know, it's just like I feel like if I really don't wanna do it, I'm not gonna, like that's just how I feel.
irregardless of the size of it.
I have a really good example, yeah, regardless of the size. So when I was a kid, it was a quinceañera, and I was like 12.
Yeah, I think, I've always kind of been a non-conformist, and I don't think it's actually been healthy. Like in high school,
Ooh,
I never really, cause I hung out with everybody, you know,
so you
so I
were a
never
popular
really.
loner.
Yeah, I was like that. Yeah, I was never really solidified in a group to where people feel attached, right? They always kind of knew me as a passerby,
You're like,
right? Like
hey.
it just passerby. Yeah, but then, yeah, so it wasn't always positive. I don't know if I had any real established like, friendships like that, you know, like really super tight. It's kind of knew everybody, right? So, but then I kind of noticed the people who have real good friendships seem to be a little bit more satisfied or happy or something, right? They were actually in the group or something. Yeah, I think growing up, and that always led to me having like a lot of fights, a lot of just bad stuff. And I was hanging out with multiple different gangs. They're like, dude, what's up with that? So probably wasn't always positive experiences. All right, what do we think? Let's start here.
I would say like when I was like in middle school, like I felt like a lot of like people like that went to my school, like they wore like a lot of like basketball shoes, like, you know, like KD or like just like Jordans or whatever.
Yeah.
And like I guess my friend group like was wearing that stuff as well, so I kind of felt like influenced to kind of like buy that just to kind of like
To fit in.
Yeah.
Alright, so like Jordans, right? And even Nike gear. You're like, you might be influenced to buy it because, man, there's value in having conversations about, like, yeah, you got the new Nikes on, right? You got the new Jordans, the new this and that, right? So you may be inclined. Over here.
I was saying, I had like a group of friends, they wanted to go to a concert and I wasn't sure where to go. And at first it was like 2 to 3 people, but like most people agreed to go. I feel like that pressure and the FOMO sounds, I kind of just hate it.
Yeah, you're like, hey, I don't wanna go see this artist, I don't wanna go to the concert. But then like, okay, but there's like 15 of us going, like, alright, that might be fine, right? So like, just the context of the number of people going override, like, I don't really care who's for the person performing or something like that. Does that make sense? Anything you could think of?
When I moved to Ohio, I kind of adopted some like sports teams there as like, not my favorite team, but I would kind of cheer for them. But then, once my brother became a big Browns fan, I really hated the Browns, just to kind of spite him.
Right, you like, yeah, I was the same way too, like if you have a sibling, it's always more entertaining to have a rivalry than like always agree, right, cause you wanna separate your identity from your brother or whatever. So yeah, so kinda to disassociate yourself from the Browns, right, cause your brother likes it. I'm the same way too, like honestly, I hate the Bears. I go to both the Cubs.
You told us.
Yeah, I hate the Bears. I go to both Cubs and Sox, and I get uniforms for both. So some people like, they're not loyalists, you flip. And the Bulls I haven't liked since Jordan and Pippen and those guys teams like that. But then when I go out and I still go to the venues with people and corporate stuff, and it's always like an argument. Like, how could you? Like, how you're Chicago and how could you? I'm like, because I can't. That's not anything you can do.
No.
Okay, over here.
I couldn't really think of anything, honestly. All I know that in high school I would get pressured by my group of friends to go out.
To go out.
Yeah.
What do you think the pressure is about?
Just like,
That I
I
get
always
like,
wanted to go home after school.
okay. Do you feel like it?
Just stay, it'll be fun.
Do you feel like you would lose friends if you kind of keep rejecting them about
Not lose friends, more like losing the experience.
the experience? FOMO,